Hi everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Norwich Theatre Talks. Up and down the country, in towns and cities, Pride celebrations are in full strength at the moment. Here in Norwich, just on Saturday, we had an amazing turnout for the city's 15th annual Pride celebration. One of the things that's become really strong in every city and town that I've been to celebrate Pride is the growing presence of drag culture and drag artists really finding their space in celebrating their identity within this amazing, amazing culture. So in this episode, we're having a bit of a focus on the art of drag, and we've three amazing guests. Later in this episode, as we always do, I'm going to be talking to a member of the Norwich Theatre team. By day, he is Nic Gordon, and he's our graphic design and brand coordinator. But just over 2 years ago, he started out as a drag artist, performing by the name Jester Mirage. Also on the podcast, we're going to be talking to Joseph Ballard, an artist well known across Norfolk and who we've been working with at Norwich Theatre as a composer, musician, choir director and performer for many years. But today we're going to be talking about his drag alter ego, Titania Trust, and some of the work that he's been doing with communities and to explore the history and the activism of drag culture. My first guest is absolutely no stranger to drag culture himself. He is an internationally renowned choreographer. He has written several books. He has directed. He's even conducted an orchestra. He's perhaps best known for being the grumpy judge on Strictly Come Dancing, but he's here with us in Norwich because he's donning drag once again in the role as Miss Hannigan in Annie. Well, Craig, welcome to Norwich, and you are here opening tonight in Annie, and the role of Miss Hannigan, an incredible role, but a role that you visited a few times.
Yeah, I started it in 2015 with this particular production and director and choreographer. And it's been on and off, you know, but I don't normally do the whole tour, which I'm doing at the moment. And I normally do about 3 months, and then someone else takes over and we share the role out. And of course, as you're probably well aware, I was sharing the role with the late but very, very great Paul O'Grady, who sadly passed away. So I've taken on his dates as well. But I absolutely love the show. Yeah. It's fantastic. And it's really, what I love about it is the character I play, Miss Hannigan, who's either drunk or hungover in every single scene and hates children and dogs and all sorts. So it's sort of perfect, really, for me.
It is a fabulous character, but it's a character with, I guess, a slightly iconic precedent, because I mean you're playing it alongside Paul, who'd done it as Lily. Carol Burnett was in the film. I think Sheila Hancock opened it in the West End. Where's
that was back in, what, 78 or something, 76 or something.
We won't get the dates.
We weren't born then, darling.
Where's your Miss Hannigan?
I've tried to give her a little bit of class, if you like. I play her very much as a desperate, unloved woman who's just looking for love and looking for a man to take her out of this horrible situation that she's in, that she's found herself in, living on the state, looking after orphans and being very much alone, and her only friend, I'm afraid to say, is the gin bottle. Yes. You know, and I think that's why she turned into a desperate alcoholic, you know. There's always something that pushes people to that, and I think it's deep unhappiness and sad that she never ever met the right man, and so she's desperate, and in that desperation and through alcoholism, she teams up with her brother and his floozy, you know, in order to, you know, reap the benefits of selling Annie basically for 50 grand. So, and obviously, you know, the moral of the story is the baddies go to prison and Annie wins the day triumphantly, you know, as the daughter of a multi-billionaire. So, you know, what's not to love about that story? And it is actually Christmas time. So it's all like on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So for me, it's a wonderful, wonderful story, a fantastic character. I get to sing Easy Street, I get to sing Little Girls, I get to dance a bit.
Some amazing, amazing routines.
Yeah, but I play her as a real woman. I don't play it in drag, if you know what I mean. I try and divorce my drag or anything that I would do in pantomime or the characters that I've created over the years that not many people are aware of in this country because I haven't done it in this country. Except for when I did my one-man show. I then brought her back from the dead, and her name's Lavish.
And we saw a bit of you as Dolly Levi. I remember.
Oh yeah, there was that.
We did. I wanted to see more of that, actually.
Yeah, I wanted to do more, Charlie. In television, it's very quick.
Yes.
But I'd love to actually do the whole show. I mean, it'd be great, following Danny LaRue's footsteps. I suppose.
Well, tell us a little bit, because it's not your first time putting on a frock and a wig.
No.
Actually, that goes right back to the early bit of your career, doesn't it? And
yeah. Well, my first show ever was West Side Story, and that was a far cry from the musical I did after that, which was La Cage aux Folles.
Yeah,
and that came out in 1985. I did that in Australia, so that's where I learned drag, I suppose. Yeah. Learned how to do the makeup.
Yeah.
But I was playing very much a drag queen, a boy dressed as a girl, trying to fool everybody.
Yeah.
You know, so for me that was a fantastic training ground, and I fell in love with it so much that I wanted to do it at clubs afterwards, so to get my trumpet out, play the trumpet, tap dance, put my backing tracks on my cassette.
With a trumpet, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it was great. So I did this, sort of created this character called Lavish, and that's how that was born. But I loved it, you know, I really loved it. But it got very popular, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a straight actor.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, and playing roles like this, like Hannigan, for me is a dream come true.
But I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because in theatre making, we always want to kind of do different testing things, particularly with well-known work, and that sense of kind of gender flipping roles. We've had quite a lot of that recently, haven't we?
Yes.
You know, Company. I thought it was an amazing show.
Oh, I love that.
Worked
yeah.
so well.
Yeah, it did.
Do you think the time has come for looking at some of these kind of amazing leading lady roles and actually, you know, seriously thinking about putting them as drag roles?
Yeah, there's no reason why Mama Rose couldn't be played
exactly,
by
Mama
a man,
Rose.
and there's no reason, you know, Georges in La Cage aux Folles could be played by a woman.
Absolutely.
You know, there's absolutely nothing sort of stopping that in a way. And Victoria is that story anyway, really, where you're gender flipping. You know, she's pretending to be, of course, a man dressed as a woman, you know, who sings, but of course she's a woman dressed as a man dressed as a woman.
Yeah.
So it's, that's, you know, that was ages ago. They were doing all the gender bender stuff then. But I think, in all seriousness and truth, that any actor should be able to play any role that they want.
That's right.
And, you know, just be great at that. That's what acting is, whether it be a man, a woman, or an animal.
Absolutely.
You know, I've had to play a cat in Cats.
Yes.
You know, so I had to try and study cats.
Yes.
You know, and someone had to be the whale in Moby Dick. So
exactly.
you've got so there are actors,
the back half of the panto horse.
Play, yeah, well, exactly. But actors are there to play that. So now people are really trying to cast everything, I think, just as exactly who you are. Yeah. And I think that's sort of wrong, actually, in the business. And I don't see any problem with a woman playing a man's role or a man playing a woman's role. There's been a lot of gay men over the years, namely Rock Hudson, who played straight men.
Absolutely.
All the way through his entire career, until it was discovered, obviously through you know, HIV and everything, that he was gay and had to come out. So, you know, but he was playing straight men all the way through.
You're absolutely right. I think to focus too much on the individual and how they identify is doing down the storytelling and actually the quality of the performance.
Yeah, but you did ask me about, you know, the Carol Burnett and how Paul sort of put a Lily spin on it.
Yeah.
I mean, Carol Burnett I loved because she really was the insanely drunk one, you know, and I sort of got the idea of being desperate for a man from her because she, at any point in any one of her scenes, she was eyeing men up, you know, and feeling terribly sorry for herself and drinking. But I loved her because she was crashing into walls and doing all of that stuff drunk. I don't do that sort of slapstick comedy. Okay. I try, because my ambition is to make her as vulnerable as possible as well. So I sort of go for the sex side of her and that dark, terrible side where she is feeling desperately you know,
Yeah.
terrible about herself, and also desperately, you know, wanting to find love and just never achieves it.
It's fabulous that you are having this opportunity to take on these roles. Yet you're doing things on every front, aren't you? I mean, audiences in Norwich saw Strictly Ballroom here fairly recently, and actually, you know, the amount of your choreography that's going out on tour. I had like Hot Mikado out again.
Oh yeah,
I
loved
that
doing
show.
that one. Yeah, there were so many. I did Spend, which I really loved as well. Because there aren't that many British ones that are written, you know, and that was so much fun to work on something really sort of northern as well. I would never give up that side and my love for theatre, you know, as much as I do a lot of TV as well.
Of course.
And I'm challenged in all sorts of ways, that maestro at the opera.
I remember that. That was you conducted Bohème.
Yeah, I conducted Act 2 of Bohème.
Tell us a bit about what that project was about.
Well,
again, it's extraordinary.
It's probably the most emotional, I think, project I've ever worked on. I mean, when I watch it back, the final, when I see, you know, what I'd achieved, it really brings me to tears, because it's the music that lives through your heart, your soul, your blood. You know, and Puccini is just so emotional, and I just loved it. But it was probably the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. In fact, jumping out of an aeroplane with a parachute on was a lot easier.
Why? Why was it so?
Because I thought, well, if I land, I'll just die, you know.
Okay.
But to die at the Opera House and not really die, and have to live with that for the rest of your life would be horrific. You know. And there's something euphoric about jumping out of an aeroplane, because you don't sort of think it's real. But when you're stood at the podium and you've got, you know, 300 people in the orchestra and 189 people on stage in front of you, you sort of go, right, I really am here.
All those thousands of people behind you.
But it was really great, and it taught me a valuable lesson, because I've been a director. I direct opera, I choreograph opera, and it taught me a valuable lesson about maestros and how much they care about the music and their interpretation of it. And I didn't quite get that when I've been directing before. So for me, it just opened up that whole world of why conductors and maestros are so passionate about tempos, about all, you know, every aspect of the music. And as a choreographer, I am the same, because I remember going up to one maestro who walked out on me. I said, darling, it's way too slow. How are we supposed to be doing point work, you know, while you're dragging it out, you know? And I wanted the tempos raised, but of course, it was, I learned that it wasn't my responsibility. It was his responsibility, and only my responsibility to choreograph to his tempos, not the opposite way around. And now I get it. I completely understand it. But it took me doing that show to learn and understand, you know, the real base to opera, you know, which is the writing, of course.
Of course.
But it's and the storytelling. And
is that it sounds to me that that's something that drives you, learning, always learning, not sitting back, challenging yourself. You know, that's
I mean, they asked me to present the one show, and I thought, I've never done that. Live. What, read an auto cue, darling? Live. I think people, they see you as a confident person, but I was terrified going in to do that, half-hour show or whatever it is. But I was totally terrified, because there is no turning back. You know, not on live television in that way. It's one thing judging like I do on Strictly Come Dancing, because I have vast wealth of knowledge, you know, about that. But I try and put myself into different worlds and challenge myself all the time.
But even in that Strictly context, I think I'd read that actually when you started that, Latin and Ballroom wasn't necessarily something that had been natural territory, but you went and learnt, didn't you?
Yeah, I had to. I went to the late then Goodman School of Dance in Dartford.
Did you? And he drilled you?
I did that secretly.
Oh, right.
I think because I'd already got the job.
Okay.
But, you know, I wasn't employed as a ballroom and Latin specialist.
No.
You know, that's what Lem was there for. And Bruno, of course, who was on the panel originally too, was there as commercial dance side. I was there as the theatrical storytelling side, you know, so we could have fights and have differences of opinions, and that's what it's all about. I think it was all for ballroom and Latin champions, they'd all be banging on about the same thing.
Yeah.
And it'd be technique, technique, technique. And everyone at home has no clue about the technique.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, well, most people. So I speak for the, you know, in layman's terms about what I see, and people get on that side of it and then start learning and understanding. But yes, it's true. I did go to Len Goodman's, and then the next year I wrote a book on
Yes.
Teach Yourself Ballroom Dancing. So I had to then study the teachers, all the teachers' notes and everything else, and then get, you know, my teachers and everything for
Fantastic.
it. So I'm very good at
But that's
talking the talk.
yeah. Well,
Well, I can, but you know,
Yeah.
I haven't been trained in that world.
No,
so-
no, no.
But I do know what I'm talking about when it comes to it.
Well, and it's now going in. You are the longest serving of the Strictly judges. You're
In
going
the
into
world.
in the world.
Yes.
Wow, across all of the different
There's
versions.
60 worldwide, yeah.
So will you now teach judges school for this?
Yeah, I could
You could.
teach people how to judge.
Yeah.
One must hold the pedal this way and bring it up to just under the chin, 1 centimetre under the chin. And don't score it above a 4 too early, darling.
Absolutely not.
That's my advice, anyway. No, I think my advice to anyone, you know, that is judging is to be honest, you know, and talk about what you see and, you know, what you feel. And that's what I do. And I can't come in with a preconceived notion or idea of
No.
what it is. I,
No.
You know, I think it's really important to see what the people see. Even if you watch a rehearsal, it's always different on the night because of people's nerves.
Absolutely.
And you don't know, they might stop dancing, they could fall down the stairs. I mean, you know, I never come in with a preconceived idea of what I might say or what I might not say.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Oh, Craig, it's been fantastic to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We can't wait to see Miss Hannigan trotting across the Norwich stage
With her nails. Jo.
with her nails already on.
Yes.
Have a fabulous time with us in Norwich.
I cannot wait. Thank you very much. It's been delightful.
Thank you.
I like stories. Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland.
Nothing looks like what it is on the inside. What makes you who you are? Your face or what you do? There's things what lurk out there. Can you be brave?
Like this. It isn't pretend, it is real.
All of it was dreamed into existence. Go away! Give me my boy!
No, you stay out, stay out! Will anything ever be like it was before?
My next guest is a Norfolk-based drag artist known to many as Titania Trust, and we're going to hear about her shortly, but please welcome Joseph Ballard. Joe, welcome to Norwich Theatre Talks and to Podcast Corner here at the Playhouse.
Thank you for inviting me along. It's great to be
Now,
here.
you are really well known across Norfolk, both as Joseph and as your drag persona, Titania Trust. Tell us first about your work as Joseph, and then we'll go into Titania.
Yes, so my work as Joseph began in music hall and variety, really, and that's, you know, from when I was 6, I was hoiked around the country in these music hall shows, and I'd never really touched on drag at all, apart from like dressing up in my mum's maternity dresses as a young age and things like that. But actually, it was mostly music hall and variety, and getting into panto. But as an actor, I've done like my Shakespeare, and I've done plays. As a playwright, I sort of bring things out there. So I'm kind of a theatre producer and actor in that own right.
Yeah.
But my drag persona, my drag character is like always been seen as an add-on, but suddenly it's become a lot more of my life, and she has taken over my life a lot more than I ever planned. But as a theatre maker, you know, I enjoyed the variety of things. I enjoy getting into a really good play. Original work is great too, but I do enjoy the sense of music hall and variety, and upholding those values and traditions, because they're so valuable to today. And a bit like drag, there are politics embedded in them. And right now, to comment on social politics and to comment on that the social standing of us as a country is so important.
Absolutely, and I know that communities within your work is really important. In fact, you directed our community choir for a period of time, didn't you? And that sort of engagement with people, that breaking that barrier between performer and stage is really important.
Yeah. To me, it's that journey. When we talk about theatre makers, we talk about the journey, but for me, it's engaging people. So we used to talk about hard to reach audiences in the funding applications back in the day, whenever that was, when there was money to give out. But actually, for me, engaging people, whether it was through like Shakespeare Nation a few years ago, with Norwich Theatre, or whether it was through the community choir and other choirs and activities I run. For me, it's about animating communities and engaging people who may not necessarily want to be involved in the performing side, but actually love it and start to like it. And we know why we love the theatre, and sharing that passion and inspiring others to do it. I love that so much.
Yeah. And I think at the moment you're on. It feels to me you're on that process of bringing Joseph and Titania, and how they work and how they create closer together. That's amazing to see.
Yeah, totally. I started off as Titania Trust back in 2010. A bit of a different name then, and I was kind of a closet drag queen, if there's such a thing. Yeah, and so I'd often perform in London and around the UK. Even went abroad. I've been so lucky. At the time, I was working for the London 2012 Games as a regional programmer for 4 years. So during the day, I was in a suit or emblazoned in London 2012 logos. Then at night, I'd be going to Soho or Proud Cabaret and hosting these burlesque nights in a big orange wig and jewels. So it was a very sort of different life back then, and I've always kept a stretch separate. And then I brought Titania into pantomime, and I'm very traditional with my panto. Like a panto dame is a dame, and a drag queen is something that's so different. But in today's world, we're starting to blur those boundaries and make it work. So I put Titania Trust into panto, and suddenly it was Titania Trust performing with by courtesy of Joseph Ballard, and I was the manager. I was the person. Okay. She had her own bio, and suddenly I started to draw it together. But I still kept her at arm's reach. But and I always talk about her in the third person, which raises eyebrows.
Tell us about her. Where did she come from? How did she develop? What's Titania's view on the world?
So she originally came about through a favour for a friend who had a bucket list because he wasn't very well, and to do a drag show, and he wouldn't do it on his own. So we did as a duo, we did a dinner theatre set in Beccles in Suffolk, of all places. And you know, it was the best night. And so Titania was born. She was called Titty back then. She was a bit cooler back then, and now she's much more glam. And she's evolved over time. But with Titania, she's always supportive of Pride and the LGBTQ plus community, of refugee work. But she doesn't understand why there is discrimination in the world, and she doesn't quite understand labels. So she'll talk passionately about the LGBTQ plus community. But if you ask her, she won't really know what those mean, because to her, a person is a person. Love who you love. So I like presenting things as her, because she is slightly naive to the bad stuff that goes on in the world, until last year, of course, and when there was a big change. But what I loved about her is I wasn't this arrogant, rude drag queen persona that people often think of. You know, those quick-witted, put people down things. To me, Titania's there to make people happy and make them smile and entertain. And I love the work of Danny LaRue, and that is where I would be. And if I had a lot more money and time, I would be sewing on a lot more beads onto my gowns, because that is pure glamour, and it was harmless. And I like the idea of being an entertainer without too much baggage or anything attached to it, because I was already aware that as a performer and as a gay man in a dress, I was already being stereotyped and put into a binary, and I was petrified of that at the time. But now, Titania Trust, she's got a reason, she's got a cause, and she is getting political.
Yeah, she clearly comes broadly out of that music hall tradition, you know, which Danny LaRue did, which actually Richard Gauntlet, although he wouldn't say drag, his pantomime dame is rooted there. That's what I was thinking just last week about Hinge and Bracket.
Oh, Hinge and Bracket.
Often forgotten about, but that musical tradition, very much family focused. And you know, that's why, you know, the project you were talking about, the reading in libraries, which got that awful response, and you had to face up to that. But actually she's the right character to be doing that, and you're channeling that now into a program of activism, which we're going to be working on together. Tell us a bit about how she's going to stand up for that.
Oh yeah, yes. So after last year, we're getting a lot of abuse, physical attacks, and people trying to, attacking Titania almost as a separate person and then attacking myself. Titania had to get political, and she's all about stand up for what is right on the right side of history and have a voice. And I thought, but I've kind of done it, but I've kind of skirted around the issue, literally around what I'm doing. So I thought, actually, let's put her into the heart of politics. So all the things I've done as Titania has been for good, always for a good cause. So for me, now she's placed well to talk about activism with, yes, suffering things myself. I feel like I've got a bit of a stronger voice. It's, and I don't want to go on about being a victim, but those things have made me stronger, and I'm such a different person as Joseph and as a performer, and Titania has evolved so much. And where we see activism, we look at drag, and in the week-long course that I'll be looking at with yourselves, I'll be going right back to the roots of drag, and I'm talking ancient Greek times. I'm talking cave people times, right the way through into your medieval, into your Shakespeare, into then into vaudeville, music hall, into the First World War, soldiers, and going right forward. But what we've got about drag is, I used to avoid the term drag and drag queen, a bit like Danny LaRue. I'd say, oh no, I'm Titania Trust, that's who I am. But as soon as someone of one gender dresses as something different and doesn't perform, it becomes political. So I can say, I'm going to perform in a dress and a wig, and it's just pure entertainment. There's politics in there because I'm doing something different. I'm breaking down the boundaries, and I'm presenting something that's different to my binary. And unfortunately, we're seeing attacks and abuse towards like the trans community and the non-binary community, which is different to performance, so we won't go too much into that. But what we're seeing is it is so political as soon as that happens. Like you saw it when women started wearing trousers many years ago. That was a political movement. Was it about comfort? Was it about this? But what I found now is I'm embracing that, and I can make a point and make a stand, and all the way through history where you've got music hall, with Vesta Tilley being a really famous drag queen before those terms were about. She was talking about social class. She was being a posh guy in a tailcoat, talking about that. And then we go, and then Dan Leno and his famous characters. But then we go through history and where it is the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence in 1979 in America. There as nuns making that stand at a pride event. So for me, drag artists, we're often louder, we're often much more colourful, and we've got a lot to say, and we want people to hear it. And I think that's where I'm channeling Titania right now, is, stepping back a bit, going, how can I really make a difference and use her voice and just her aesthetic to bring attention to some really good causes.
Earlier in this episode, I was talking about the wonderful late great Paul O'Grady, who of course had his own activism, because here was this Lily Savage blonde bomb site character really drawing attention to social inequality as the girl from Birkenhead, talking about some quite shocking things really. And I suppose at that time, when that drag character was developing in the 80s, 90s, those were the issues to comment on, which was a lot about social inequality. Now, at this point, actually, the debate is different, isn't it? And drag still has that opportunity to comment on issues that are really prevalent around gender and the sexual identity.
So right now, it's really important for drag artists to amplify those the topical things that we're talking about today, about gender conformity, about different identities, and about talking about acceptance and articulating the differences and the similarities. Actually, we're just all human beings, and education is a big part of it. And when you've got that bigger voice, that bigger presence, you can educate people a lot quicker. I feel. And that's the superpower, I think, of our drag artists, is we can do things quicker and much more immediate. And right now, we need to act fast, because we're seeing people across the world and here in the UK being stigmatised or discriminated against. So we need to act fast and loud.
And the residency is from the 17th to the 23rd of September with us at Norwich Theatre. And just briefly say, who's it for? Who should come to this?
It's a really good question, because I've had a few people asking me direct about this, and I say drag has no rules. So basically anybody's welcome who's got an interest in performing in drag, whether they've got some experience or maybe none at all. And I have to tell you now, it's not going to be about RuPaul. This is not a drag race week at all. I will refer to the drag race stuff that's going on, but it's not about that. And as you can tell, I'm not, I will talk about it, and I appreciate its place in drag history, however you want to call it, but actually it's going to be about where it comes from and the art form and how it's relevant today. And British drag is different to American drag, but again, I'll repeat that drag has got no rules. Anybody is welcome of any identity to come and share this week, and it's a week of exploration. And like we said about just now, you can't separate yourself from your drag character, and I always thought it was one thing, but actually there's going to be bits of yourself. So again, I hope that people will come onto the week to develop their performance skills, but also that exploration of their self in today's world.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Joe, for joining us on Norwich Theatre Talks, and find out more about that session on norwichtheatre.org. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Now, if you're a regular visitor to Norwich Theatre and you book plenty of tickets, you will have seen these beautiful pieces of print that we produce. And my next guest is the person behind all of this stuff. It's our graphic design and brand coordinator, Nic Gordon. Nic, welcome to Norwich Theatre Talks.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, tell us a little bit, first of all, about your role at Norwich Theatre and the kind of things you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so I'm the graphic designer and brand coordinator, so I basically handle pretty much everything visual that you're seeing across the brand and dipping into shows that we produce. And it can vary between like the more mundane end, so I'll be doing sort of, your information signage around the building, to screens on the building, to the chalkboard out of the front of the playhouse, and then like the more wacky stuff all the time, like cloths for the shows and odd bits of panto craziness.
Yeah. And I think that people don't realise actually that they think the creative roles in this organisation are all to do with the work on the stage. Actually, we rely upon you to create the imagery for some of that work as well.
Yeah, and it's really different in a way because a lot of the time you're handling creating a visual world for a show that doesn't exist yet.
Absolutely.
And that can often influence the show in some ways and build and evolve as you learn more about what the show's going to be.
Yeah.
So it can be a really interesting challenge.
Yeah.
And also the angle of, well, what's going to communicate what this show is to an audience who doesn't have much information.
Yeah. And tell us a bit about how you ended up working as a designer. What was the motivation for that?
Yeah, so I've done visual arts for a long time. So I did arts at school, and then I did an illustration degree, and then ended up in graphic design because that was where the jobs that I could get were. And then this job came along and was a really lovely thing for me to find because it combines graphic design with another love of mine, that's the theatre.
And you're quite a seasoned performer, aren't you? You are part of the really thriving theatre making community here in Norwich, and we've seen you on the stages quite a few times.
Yeah. So I've been doing Amdram for most of my life. Back in Derby where I grew up, and then when I came to Norwich for university, threw myself immediately in the Amdram scene here, which is an amazing scene with loads of different things going on and loads of brilliant venues. And it's just been a wonderful community to be part of and a very varied experience of shows that I've been able to have here.
So therefore, with that passion for performance, the creative design eye, developing a drag persona and moving into drag art, that's natural, I'm guessing?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing where I took a long time to get into drag, but when it happened, it seemed like an almost natural thing that I've been building towards without even realising, because it combines it. I often think it's a melting pot of every artistic discipline that you want to throw at it. So there's performing in there, but then there's also the visual aspect that you can have complete creative control over. And I was drawing drag characters before I then ended up becoming one myself.
I guess it's the difference between creating the artwork for a show that exists and a show that doesn't. You can start from scratch.
There's something very thrilling about the complete freedom, and for me, coming from a theatrical background, you kind of have the thrill of, oh well, if I wanted to do this number or play this character that I'll never get a chance to play, all these amazing female songs that are in theatre that we never get to do. And then you can kind of think, well, what's my angle if I could go something completely wild and a completely new take on that?
And so on that note, I've met your drag persona.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about her and where she came from.
Yes, so my drag character is Jester Mirage. She came from, I have always loved I started watching Drag Race, as a lot of people who are getting into drag now have found their point of origin. And I always loved the outlandish drag, the kind of androgynous drag, and I knew that was what I wanted to do. And I've always loved characters I wanted the most furthest transformation from myself possible. And coloured skin was a really fun way to do that. And that I intended to do lots of different colours, but the first drag look I did was a Green Goblin inspired look. And then I bought all the green makeup. So I was like, well, I guess I'll keep doing
You've
this.
committed now.
Yeah. But it's really she's become this alien character. And really, it's been an amazing threshold of stuff that I can do with her, in terms of I've done completely monstrous looks that are creatures, very much so. And then as I've gone further into drag, I've explored what does my character look like if you are in a glamorous traditional drag outfit and wig, but you're still green.
Yeah.
And
how because it's relatively recent for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
How was it, that sort of thinking about that move to then actually sharing this character with the world? That must be a big thing, you know?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was a massive deal for me at the time, and I've got so used to it now that it's quite strange. But it was I'd never really been to kind of queer spaces very much at all. And as soon as I kind of found drag coming out of the pandemic, I very quickly became enamored with it and very fixated on the idea of doing it myself. But that first sort of time going out in drag was terrifying.
Yeah.
And my first performance, actually, I really hated my makeup. I was like walking there in the rain. It was all a bit of an ordeal, but I finished it, and I found it a very stressful experience. But I was immediately, all I could think about was what I was going to do next.
Yeah.
And it was this fixation of, I know that I want to do this.
Yeah, and it's an evolving process, I guess. You know, you're kind of feeding from the audience, because there's so much you could paint. You're the canvas here, aren't you? And there's so much scope for you to go with. Do you think you'll reach a point where she's done?
I don't know. It's such an interesting thing, because with drag, as soon as you get into it, you go in hard. It can cost a lot of money, and it can take over your house, and you have all this stuff. So it's one of those things where I'm just sort of seeing how it goes. But it's really, the thing that it's really brought alive for me is aspects of theatre that I've always wanted to do. There's an element of, I've done Amdram for years, where you're participating in existing plays and other productions that aren't your own, but being able to produce your own and come up with ideas, and it's up to you if it sinks or swims.
Yeah.
But you have this kind of, as opposed to if I were to do like solo performances as myself, you have this immediately interesting visually character and like a context that you can put her in, where you can try stuff, and if it bombs, and you move on. And if it succeeds, then it's so rewarding. Yeah.
Now, I asked a similar question of a guest earlier on who's done drag for a little longer than you have, and you kind of touched on it there, is you can pick the roles you want to play. In that persona, you know, there's this great game, is roles I'll never play. So if you were to take Jester and play any role, I mean, Jester has a touch of the alphabet in Wicked about her by her colour, doesn't she?
I have been. It's one of those things where I kind of have to do an alphabet number at some point.
Yeah.
But it is, I'm no means currently able to sing with any justice any songs from Wicked.
That's a big one. That is a big
That's a big one. But I've really enjoyed the times where I've been able to do those. I do a Chicago number all the time, and that's a show that I love, and I love the choreography, and I love the aesthetic of it.
Yeah.
And being able to play with that in a world that I have control of.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it's there's a real fun and joy in finding the humour in a in a serious song or the seriousness
Yeah.
in a humorous song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love doing in my show that I produced during the year, the sort of my sort of 11 o'clock sad ballad that I put in the show is me singing "It's Not Easy Being Green," and I was like, well, what happens if I try and sing this Muppet song as if it's the final moment of the show, and it's a really heartrending ballad. And I don't know if I achieved it, but I had fun playing with that context.
Oh, fantastic. Nic, it's fascinating to talk to you about where you're at exploring this new world, a new identity, a new stage persona. Thank you so much for joining us on Norwich Theatre Talks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Norwich Theatre Talks. We really hope you've enjoyed the talk today, and if you have, please do let us know. We really value hearing your feedback and your comments, and also in the comments you might want to answer the question, what's the role you'd most like to play? Thank you again for joining us. We'll be back again in a month's time.